Thank you, Your Holiness, for coming to Madison and giving us the opportunity for these incredible teachings. You came here first in 1979 and then gave the first Kali Chakra initiation outside of Asia in 1981. Came back in 1987 after you got the Nobel Prize. In fact, you've come here 9 times, so we are tied with Washington, D.C. and New York City. Go Badgers. His Holiness is also here because of Richie Davidson and the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds. Thank you again for coming to Madison. Deer Park also wishes to thank the countless volunteers who have helped us in security and making Deer Park beautiful for His Holiness and the entourage, painting, ticket sales, brochures, advertising, setting up the hall, setting up this beautiful stage, just so many things to make the visit so absolutely wonderful. And for that, I think we should give thanks to everyone who works so hard. And we here, the students at Deer Park, wish to thank Geshe Sopa for coming to Madison in 1967, for teaching at the University of Wisconsin for more than 30 years, for setting up Deer Park Monastery as a center for learning, as a center for meditation, and as a center for Buddhist studies. And for that, we are eternally grateful and fortunate to have you as our spiritual leader. Thank you, Geshe-la. And finally, today, we would like to dedicate all of our actions to the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and to the happiness of all sentient beings. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Indeed, indeed, I'm very happy once more here in this place. As Salva mentioned, since my first visit America, 1979, this place quite familiar, and mainly this dear, respected, great scholar, Geshe-la. I know his teacher and teacher's teacher. I think at least 4 generations, really top scholars. They are teacher's teacher, actually, during 13th Dalai Lama. You see, through the examination, they become top scholar. Then eventually he become the head of, supreme head of Yellowhead sect, like that. So then I know him when I was very young. And that Tundu Tundula, that great scholar, is a very close friendship with 13th Dalai Lama, like that. So then, Savala, I always remember 1959, when my final Geshe examination, he was one of the debater Dieu la mea de Ricoria, Taxadamari, Yana. Do Bendy singing out of the pondering singing out of sin. Yeah, true. Translators.
This needs to be on.
Oh,
Okay. Geshe-la chose for the topic for his debate that he was engaging with His Holiness the theme of Buddha nature based on Maitriya's text, Sublime Continuum.
so I always remember him. I think one of the reasons when my own sort of final examination is to take place, I myself a little bit nervous and fear. So therefore, those events remember very clearly. So now he, over 90 years, his physical condition, very weak. But you see, his whole life dedicated for Buddha Dharma and also Tibetan cause. There's no regret. Now, from the Buddhist viewpoint, while he alive, his life really dedicated for something useful, some meaningful, some purposeful. So that creates sufficient merit, will have good reincarnation next life. There's no question. Like that. So actually, I mentioned yesterday also, when I met, I mentioned that. Certainly, I also pray like that. So now, here, quite a big number of people now come to listen my lecture on one Buddhist text. However, as usual, at the beginning, I always see, telling the basis of all different religious traditions. As a sort of part of introduction of Buddhism. So firstly, I think in human history, around 4,000 to 5,000 years since then, the concept of religion, faith, I think gradually developed. I think Egyptian civilization, certain kind of sort of faith, I think there, and as well as Chinese civilization, and also
Indus Valley.
Indus Valley civilization. So eventually, because of different location, different culture, different way of life, so different philosophical views also then is developed. And different religious tradition. I think different religious tradition develop, and some with philosophical concept, some simply just worship, like that. So some of those who believe, not much philosophical background, then time passes, these also sometimes disappear. But those religious traditions which have a certain philosophical background, then remain much stronger, much longer. Now most of the major world religious tradition which have some philosophical sort of, concept, then I think at least around 2,000 years, like that. Now among those religion or faith with some philosophical background, one time in India, and the center of Sikhism, Amritsar, we had one seminar, I think international kind of sort of seminar. There one, I think, scholar of Sufism. He, while he sort of today talk, you see, he mentioned all major world religions. You see, three questions. You see, raise and try to answer these three questions. Number one question is who am I? What is self? Then all except Buddhism, the rest of all major religious tradition, you see, explain or believe soul is the self. In Indian tradition also, the concept of Atma, self. When they describe soul, Atma, you see, it is something oneness, not like this physical level. You see, different sort of, different part, and also mind. So soul or Atma is something oneness, right? Oneness. And this physical, nobody feel this old physical at the time of birth already there. Nobody feel that. Time change, physical elements also changing, but soul never changing. So not only within this life, but soul, I think according to those religions, we believe Creator. Then when Creator creates our soul, that's the beginning. But after death, our soul, body, no longer sort of working or living, but the soul remains. So till final judgment come. Even after final judgment, this soul either heaven or hell. Then not very clear what will happen. But doesn't matter. In heaven, permanent, no end, very good, very happy. If hell, permanent, no end, then quite terrible. So, but then some Indian traditions, although they have the concept of soul, Atma, but at the same time, they also, you see, have the sort of view, law of causality. So original source is Creator. Creator creates our soul. Then life after life, many lives. So that due to their own behavior, their own karma. So there are differences, but all except concept of soul. Something
Something that is independent of the physical and the mental elements that make up the person.
Now next question, whether there is beginning of that soul or not. This is the second question. So those religion which believe creator, then of course when creator creates soul, that's the beginning of I, self. So according to Christianity, you see, this very life, and I think Islam also same, this very life created by God. So this is first beginning of soul at the time of Kasada, create. So then those traditions which have the sort of view of previous lives. As I mentioned earlier, among those traditions which believe previous life, but still ultimately God created, or Brahma created. So therefore, there is beginning. Now Jainism and one of the ancient Indian non-Buddhist sort of tradition, that is Sangha, and then Buddhism. These three traditions, no concept of creator. So therefore, according to these three, recently I had a very good sort of discussion with one great Swami. As a spiritual leader, besides spiritual leader, also great scholar. I had sort of fruitful sort of discussion about the Madhyamika philosophy. He knows Nagarjuna's the Madhyamika Mulakarika. So I had some sort of clear sort of confirmation from him that according Sangha philosophy, no beginning. The self, no beginning. And as well as Jain and Buddhism. So no beginning. Now question, whether there is end of that self. Now answer, according to his religion, I don't know, as I briefly mentioned before, I don't know. The Sangha philosophy, no end. They did it. So, jizo zhuishebe namju dashini shanga. Jizo zhuibe namju di ta zoyo rengshin ba mashiba cheche mongbai wangi ini diawani diawata sirun sirun dukseni dongin yongde she. Ini zoyo namju yinba she yin zane ini namju di zoyo yin pa tim. Ini da shiri zo 다 다들 면도다 다시르기 기부 짱짱 사주서는 nirvana 타바서 디 다시르기 기부 됐다 타요 말이스 no end.
According to this ancient Indian system of thought known as Samkhya philosophy, it understands the universe in terms of 25 fundamental kind of elements that make up the reality, and the process of enlightenment and process of staying imprisoned within the cycle of existence is understood in terms of knowledge or ignorance. And while we are in a state of ignorance, we stay within the sphere of just appearances, and we tend to not recognize that what we experience in the empirical world are ultimately manifestations coming up of what is known as the primal substance. And through spiritual practice, once the individual comes to recognize that what we see as the world of diversity is nothing but manifestations of this primal substance, then all of this diversity comes to dissolve and only the eternal self remains. So the point is that according to this Samkhya philosophy, which is a non-theistic tradition, the self or the eternal, Atman, the self, has no end.
Then as far as Buddhism is concerned, I think Jainism, I'm not very clear. So far, there's no, no opportunity. Jain, I know there's many Jains, wonderful practitioner, but I haven't sort of serious discussion about these things so far. So I'm looking forward to see one Jain scholar as well as a practitioner for further discussion. So I'm not very sure. Then, as far as Buddhism is concerned, firstly, no independent self. Self is mere designation on the combination of body and mind. Here you see Buddha stated in the Dajachawa Dujisim, Tala Kasa, Daja Dujisim, Tene Tawar Kirwayins, Duji Pungun Di Tongde, Tala Dani Yamayins.
This needs to be kept on all the time, can you please? In the case of Buddhism, there is a statement by the Buddha himself where he talks about how the sense of self is in fact the source of all the problem. And it is actually a notion that arises on the basis of the 5 aggregates, the physical and the mental aggregates that make up the individual. So, however, these physical and the mental aggregates are in reality devoid or empty of a true or independent self.
Ona, and Ta Yomar Besana, Ta Beba Maris, Pena, Chidri Yala, Sonala, Deni Sing the Javatar, Tishi Pungunam Dene, Kuzo Simja Javins.
Then the question is raised, in that case, does that mean there is no such thing as the person or the self, the individual? And here the Buddha responds that that's not the case. Just as the existence of a chariot can be understood in terms of the different parts that make together and a chariot arises and which is real, in the same manner, through the aggregation, the combination of body and the mental elements, there is an individual, there is the person.
So, person or self may have designated on the combination of body and mind. So therefore, I think we can say body, speech, mind combine these elements, then self designated. So the basis of designation about self is actually the mind. Mind also,
So, for example, in Buddhism, when we speak of what is the basis for the identity of the individual as a person, one understands it in terms of the continuity of the conscious experience, continuity of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. So therefore, the mind, there are 2 categories of mind or consciousness. Sensorial consciousness, one division. That obviously, sensorial consciousness entirely depend on physical organs, on brain. Then another level of consciousness. Now, for example, another level or another kind of consciousness. Now, for example, when I look at you, the first appearances that received by eye consciousness. Then, this is my friend. I know since many years. Now, that's the mental level. And also, you see, when you look at me, there's some sort of appearances. Now close your eye, reflect. You see that sort of appearances. Now, the sensory consciousness now no longer working, but reflection on mental level. Now faith, compassion, wisdom, these from mental level, not sensorial level. So now that mental level also, while the senses organs fully function, the mental consciousness still there. I'm working, judgment, all these things has happened. Then when we have dream, the sensory level consciousness no longer active or functioning, the mental level. Now, deep sleep, another deeper level of mental consciousness. Even when we faint, or like a coma, the deeper level of consciousness there. So therefore, consciousness, there's many different levels of consciousness. Now, some scientists also now showing interest. Some people, after clinically death, the heart beating stop. And then within a short period, blood circulation to brain cease. So clinically death. But the body remain very fresh. That kind of that state, sometimes 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks happen. I think last over 50 years, at least, I think we noticed 30, around 30 of them. That kind of sort of phenomena actually is happening. So it is quite interesting to carry investigation. What the factor which keep body fresh? Some cases, you see, before death, you see, because of long illness and also old age, physical very weak. After death, clinically, that state, the body become much fresher, like that. That actually is recorded like that. So now, our explanation is the most subtle level of mind still in the body. So it is some sort of influence in the body. So therefore, body remain fresh. So these are worthwhile further investigation. So in any way, Buddhist sort of concept is that subtle level of mind also, you see, depend its own causes, like a grosser level of mind, or even this physical. Without cause, it will never happen. So therefore, there must be causes. Now in the causes, there are two kinds, substantial cause and cooperative cause, two types. Now for example, the eye consciousness, there are the cooperative causes. One, eye organ or brain. And then light, then the object. These are cooperative causes. Then there is almost, I think, substantial cause, the Tematagin said.
Yes. So immediately preceding consciousness now.
Tematagin Shebangama Mena, Mixakitumdua.
So although all of these conditions may be there, the sensory faculty, the object, and the light, but if there is no immediately preceding continuity of conscious experience, consciousness, then the visual experience wouldn't arise.
So, Najuda, Mikin, Dakin, Tematagin Shetedo.
So therefore, in Buddhist texts on philosophy of mind and epistemology, we speak of three kinds of conditions that give rise to a sensory experience, such as the visual perception. One is the objective conditions, that is the object in front of you. And then the other one is the sensory basis, which is the eye organ. And then finally, the third condition, which is the immediately preceding condition, which is the conscious continuity of the mind.
Tsongkhapa Tien So 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 Tung Mo Imbe ya kaso rechi ta lengen chi de chi. Bana sungzi mi shi suki namden kya de mi kodik che. Wa ta di sungzi mi shi di suk zibu ma to dam mi zibu di dargen ong bu che. Ta de seri ngoli de di tematagin che.
So given that there are these three principal conditions, in a single moment of experience, such as a visual perception, there are different imprints of these conditions because each of these conditions have different functions. The fact that visual experience assumes the form, like the image of the object in front of you, and that is the imprint of the objective condition. The fact that visual experience is that of a visible object rather than a sound is the function of the eye organ. It sort of precludes other forms of sensory experience, and the fact that this experience has the quality of being aware of something, this experiential, subjective dimension of that is the imprint and the function of continuity of the conscious experience.
So phenomena, basically two categories. One physical phenomena, one mere kasoda,
Mental.
mental. No. So each have their own sort of substantial causes. So now, for example, in this physical, it's a composition of matter particles. So its own substantial causes. Now, say millions of years. Today's my body's the particle, their substantial cause already is billions of years. Even when Big Bang not yet take place, the substantial sort of sources or cause of continuation of the particle there, we call space particle. So that's the physical level. Now similarly, consciousness also must be the substantial cause. Go like that, no beginning. So matter never become consciousness. Consciousness never become matter. These two things separate. So you see, plants, flowers, you see, these have life. Physical sort of composition, some differences, otherwise it's the same, our body and these things. But then, even small insect, feeling there, cognitive power. So that's consciousness. So that's semi-pembos yachiche.
So in this way, we can make distinctions between those organisms or things which are sentient, that has the capacity to experience and be aware of, and then those things which are non-sentient, which including the living organisms as well.
So now, as substantial cause is concerned for matter, also no beginning. The Arya, there was 400 verses mentioned that. Then consciousness also is in no beginning. Because if there is beginning, then that first consciousness either without cause or different sort of cause. So that's illogical. So that's the Buddhist way. You see, try to investigate whether the basis of self, that's consciousness, whether beginning or not. If the basis of self, no beginning, then self also no beginning. That's Buddhist way description. And also rebirth theory also is come from that. And then some minor thing, yes, there are people who remember about past life quite convincingly. And then also the
And also there are individuals who have the capacity to have at least intuit future events as well.
I think some sort of people in the past, you see, some prediction about the future. Some seems is quite true. So there must be, the physical never reaches there, but consciousness, and I think speed of consciousness, I think faster than light. That's very clear. So therefore, although he's a person who have that kind of sort of capacity, I think very rare. Although there are, I think, several hundred millions of Buddhists there, I think very rare who have that kind of capacity to see future. But remember about past life, quite a number, right? Quite a number of cases. You from school or college? Some young people? Kasa?
Lapres.
Oh. So you sacrifice your own class, today's class, morning class. So that's Buddhist view. No beginning. Now question of end. Also you see no end. Now within Buddhism, within Buddhist school of thought, out of 18 because of the branches of Vipashek, I think 2 or 3, they consider when the Mahaparinirvana,
when the final nirvana is attained,
then the person, or Buddhist person, also cease, because Buddha's consciousness cease. Except that all Buddhist school of thought about Sotantik, all Buddhist school of thought is to say there is no causes to end this consciousness. So therefore, consciousness always remains till Buddhahood. Even Buddhahood, consciousness there. Individual person still there. The difference is, so therefore, samsara and nirvana, samsara, nirvana, both, you see, they both state based on continuation of subtle mind. So long the subtle mind with
afflictions.
Afflicted emotion. So long that state remain there. That's samsara. Through understand about ultimate reality, through awareness, the ignorance can disappear, can destroy, eliminate. Once on the basis of subtle consciousness, all these ignorant consciousness completely eliminated, that is nirvana. So they both the kasa shegu dojismo yimida. Shegu dojismo heji najo gyure. Dinalia teach kasa 코 규지 차와데스 코로 규지 차와데 냥년대버 규치머스 저자 코와다 냥데스야디 규기 때문에 규지기 때문에 주머드 제베링디 코와 녀무베 주머드 제베링디 코와 녀무베 주머 빵배 제외 연대도 되면 니거기 시베 규디 냥데
In one of the
시베 규디 때문에 슬론트 두고로
In one of the Buddhist texts on Tantra, there is a line which says that what we characterize as samsara is the continuity, is the continuum, and nirvana is the subsequent continuum. The point being made is that samsara and nirvana are nothing but different states of the same continuum. When the individual and its consciousness stream remains polluted, and then one is in samsara. When the pollutants of the mind are removed, and then the same continuum is nirvana.
Yeah. So, no end. Self, no beginning, no end. Whether, I think, realistic or not, that's a Buddhist concept. If we think, analyze, it is more understandable like that. Perhaps I'm Buddhist, so maybe it seems to me that's more logical like that. So when I give a lecture on Buddhism, I never try to propagate Buddha Dharma. And in fact, I have some sort of critical view establishment is Buddhist centers in non-Buddhist countries, in Europe, in America, because, you see, whether we like it or not, there are different religious traditions there. So we must respect them. We must live together with harmoniously, with mutual respect, mutual admiration. You see, therefore, those people now here, how many Tibetan who raise hand? How many Tibetan?
How many Tibetans?
Okay. Baba, Then perhaps some Chinese, traditionally Buddhist, and also Vietnamese, and Mongols, and Korean, those among non-Tibetan, those Buddhists raise hand. Yeah, okay. So it is safer and better keep your own tradition, your own traditional faith. It's better. I often is telling people one story. In early 60s, then many Tibetan, so they
Escaped.
fled from Tibet, 1959. So these people, no other way to earn except road worker. Then those Tibetans who come from central Tibet, all male, Loshensheng,
Yeah,
young. Although a lot of difficulties, but they're okay. But then you see some Tibetan who very border area. You see, they came with their family. so including some children. Or at that time, really, a lot of difficulties. So, Catholic Relief Service and some Christian sort of organization, really immense help. So at that time, and then of course beside Government of India, and also Central Relief Committee in Delhi, so a lot of help. So at that time, you see, those Christian missionaries also, you see, immense helpful. So one day, I met one Tibetan lady. Her husband, one Tibetan government official. Now he passed away. So the widow, that woman, and with, I think, three children remain. Quite young. So then she told me about her sort of difficulties, difficult lives. And then she told me some Catholic organization, immense help. And she survived, and with her children. And then those Christian organizations also, you see, take care about education, about her 3 young children. Then she told me, now, this life, now she become Christian. Then he add, next life she will be Buddhist. So that's the clear sign of confusion. So if someone asks the next life, whether in hell or heaven, so you should be Buddhist, and then difficult to say. At the final judgment, I think difficult to say. So therefore, this is clearly confusion, signs of confusion, like that. So therefore, it is better to keep one's own tradition. Meantime, you can learn from other tradition. As a Buddhist monk, learn very useful experience from Christian monks, nuns. In 70s, 80s, we have sort of exchange program. Tibetan monks, nuns visited some Christian monasteries or nunnery, mainly in Europe. And also some Christian monks, nuns, they come to India, spend some time, a few weeks in Tibetan monastery or nunnery, like that. So it is quite useful, you see, to learn from each other. Some my Christian friend actually, you see, practice some Buddhist technique about meditation and about, you see, tolerance or forgiveness. It's okay. So one day, there's one American Trappist monk, Catholic monk. Now he no longer with us. He showed me his sort of keen interest about Buddhist concept of emptiness, selflessness. And then I told him, oh, don't ask that, that's not your business. That is something unique about Buddhism. So I really feel his sort of firm conviction about God, absolute, independent. Now, if you see Buddhist concept, everything interdependent, that concept might sort of impact in his single-pointed faith. So I told him like that. So there are some unique things there. That's something different. Otherwise, there's many common practice of love, compassion, forgiveness, and also single-pointed mind. These things are common. So it is quite useful, you see, learn from each other. That's then through that way, mutual understanding you see, creates real basis, or the mutual understanding creates mutual respect. That's the basis of harmony among the different religious traditions. So now today, we really need constant effort to promote religious harmony. Otherwise, you see, in the name of religion, killing people, really divide people, is really terrible, unthinkable. So therefore, we must now here, you see, I think, few thousand people, I think, please pay more attention, you see, how to create religious harmony. That's very, very essential. So I never try to propagate Buddha Dharma. So now here, obviously, to some people, just this life, created by God, that concept is very, very powerful to follow God's sort of teaching or God's wish. I think I will tell you later something. So therefore, it is better to keep one's own tradition. Then, of course, out of millions of people, some individual, you see, may have special inclination towards different tradition, including like Buddhism. Then think seriously, not just like it's a fashioned way. Think seriously, and then if that individual really feel the other sort of tradition, one particular tradition is really effective and sort of acceptable, and then okay. But then you must keep genuine respect towards your previous religion, your family religion. It is very, very important. So here we can make a distinction. Faith, your own tradition. Respect to all traditions. It's no problem like that. That I also do that. So now, look, all different religious traditions, major religious traditions, you see, carry the same message of love, compassion, affection, and forgiveness, tolerance. As a matter of fact, you see, we can see wonderful people from different traditions, really who dedicated their life or their sort of privilege, to sacrifice their privilege. I saw many Christian nuns or monks or Christian sort of workers who really dedicated their whole life serving people, particularly less privileged poor people. I noticed in India, some remote area, some Christian sort of sisters, really working education field and sort of health field, and Africa also as well, like that. So there are sort of such strong sort of will, or affectionate, or compassionate sort of will, come from their own tradition. So therefore, all traditions have same potential. In spite of different philosophical views. Now, I think, then those theistic religions, their main message is, main practice is faith towards God, Creator. Now, look, the effect of that single-pointed faith actually reduce self-centered attitude. Extreme self-centered sort of ego is really troublemaker. So Buddhists use the method, no such sort of independent self. So self-centered ego, very much based on the concept of independent self. So Buddhists use that method, no independent self. So that's antidote to reduce self-centered attitude, one way. Christian, totally dedicate to God, submitted to God. So you see, you yourself are nothing but part of creation. So that same effect reduce self-centered, strong ego, like that. Clear? Then, compassionate sort of practice is concerned, of course, all major institutions, as I mentioned earlier, the practice of love, compassion, forgiveness, all common. That's obvious. So therefore, the all major tradition, for according different individual mental disposition, you see these different traditions are actually simply different method. Same goal, more or less, I think, same goal. So this is one thing. Now, recently I saw one report. Out of 7 billion human beings, about 1 billion human beings formally also express they are non-believer. So we cannot sort of exclude these non-believers. Still, these are human beings. Firstly, they also want happy life. And also quite 1 billion is quite substantial number. So we cannot ignore these people. So then they have no interest about religion. So mistake, you see, since they have no interest about religion, they also, you see, neglect completely about the value of compassion, practice of, the forgiveness, tolerance, these things. That's the problem. So we need another third way, without touching religion, teach or educate warm-heartedness, sense of compassion, sense of affection, sense of concern of others' well-being is very, very essential for their own happiness, successful life. So that, according to Indian sort of tradition, Indian sort of understanding, secular, according to Indian understanding, not at all, you see, meaning something negative towards religion, but rather secular means respect all religions, no preference, this religion or that religion, and also according to Indian understanding about secular also means respect non-believer. Over 1,000 years, over 3,000 years, that concept already there, respect non-believer. So I think that's very relevant to today's reality. So those people who have interest about religion, very good, through their own practice, promote these human values in order to gain inner peace. Inner peace, mental peace is very, very essential for happy life, for successful life, and happy family, happy society. I think nowadays in this country, you see, a lot of talk about gun control. Ultimately, gun control come here, related with here. Here, full of hatred, full of fear, full of anger, very difficult to control. Once is a mental attitude here, becoming more compassionate, and through intellectual thinking, whenever we made conflict, try to solve that through talk, through dialogue, not use force. Only through that way, educate our mind, change our mind. Through that way, we can achieve genuine gun control, like that. So therefore, you see, this inner peace is very, very essential, whether accept religion or not, whether believe or not. You see, these things are their own interest, their own sort of well-being. Now scientists also now saying healthy mind, very important for healthy body. Public talk usually in public talk I always is telling these things. So now here 7 billion human beings on that level, whether believer or not, whether believer or non-believer, we must share these people. There is no point to neglect about these inner value. You totally sort of concentrate about money. Yes, money very important. Sometimes you say, time is money, money is time. Oh, isn't it? Money very important. Without money, you see, you can't survive. So, very important, but you must know the value of material thing limited, because material values provide only physical comfort, not mental comfort. Some my friend, I think a billionaire, very rich, but as a person, very unhappy person. So such amount of money failed to bring inner peace. So therefore, and then furthermore, mental experience is more stronger, more powerful than physical experiences. Very clear. Physical difficulties can subdue by mental peace, mental power. Mentally, very unhappy, lonely, depression, physical, material facility cannot subdue these experiences. So, whether non-believer or believer, I think must pay more attention about these values. That not just to read one book or 2 books or listen few lectures, no. Through systematic way, through kindergarten up to university level, we must create ethics education. Ethics, not just order, but through understand, through seeing the value of ethics. And like self-discipline. Self-discipline does not mean imposed by someone. Self-discipline is for your own sort of interest. So these days I use the word hygiene of physical and similarly hygiene of emotion. That's, I think, really useful. So through education. So we are working. So now, since there's a large number of people, and particularly those young people here, I usually say telling those people whose age below 15 or 20 or 30, you are truly generation of 21st century. Like my age, or people whose age above 50, 60, we belongs to 20th century. So 20th century, gone. So 21st century, only about 13 years. But remaining this century is still yet to come. So there is a real opportunity to create better century, peaceful century, happier century. So you have those young people have very, very important sort of task or important responsibility, and you have very good opportunity. Now my generation, just reflect how sad our past century, how many people killed. Over 200 million people killed through violence. And due to violence, a lot of sort of suffering, innocent people. Some people for peace, for a happy world, praying. Pray good for individual, but for world, there is a limitation, effect of prayer. The real effect come from our action. So please pay more belief about action rather than prayer. I'm Buddhist. I also pray, but for my own peace of mind, my prayer very effective. But for community, for world, I don't believe prayer will fulfill our wish. No. So we must work hard with vision, with full knowledge about the reality. So in order to know the reality, we must look reality more holistic, more objectively. That's the only way to know the reality. So in order to carry a realistic approach, we must know the reality. There's always gap, appearances and reality. So now this text also now dealing about that. So therefore, whole people here think this world, this century should be century of peace. In order to create a century of peace, the peace does not mean no longer any sort of source of conflict. Conflict remains. I think even will increase because of global warming, because of population increasing. So, end of this century, one report I saw, human population will reach 10 billions. So these young people also, you are also become factory to produce more people, more children. So even 7 billion population, the natural resources and our lifestyle, too much consume, right? Consumerism, right? And natural resources, quite questionable. And meantime, huge gap, rich and poor there. Unbearable. You hear quite surplus way, surplus thing. But in Africa, in some area, look, those children, malnourished, malnutrition,
Malnourished.
on their face. And those mothers half starved, so starvation. Very poor. Same human being, same right. No point to forget these people. We must think of these people seriously. So therefore, you see the problem, if not increase, but I think a lot of problems will have. So the only way through dialogue and more. Now here, I think I'm not very sure whether appropriate to mention here or not. I don't know. I'm socialist. So you say, think more society rather than capitalist way of thinking, just your own interest, your own profit. So, like that. Not too much. No. Now, I go to the text. 콘서 탭이 열왜? 제 열왜? You all have the text?
You have the text with you? It's in the book, yeah. It's on page 24.
Good. Now I will explain in Tibetan. Gombuludu gajari sungdoa kasa dunghe rang chebada shenji cheda nige che gyumi toge pandam de cheji tenen jong songs dang ran samolo concern chegwa de dedurwa busin sunje dewan dewada dunghe mendu chirwa da dunghe seade gyud kenedin yungu yabade page sab started 대화도 동네에서 돼. 교도 걔는 뛰기가 돼 서비스 하래. 근데 민주주의는 그런 사물로게 에듀케이션 홀도 마시면 지고 와. 그래서 민주주의는 그 교도 걔는 저것도 가. 자, 근데 인도 동네에서 돼 간다 링가시게 동네에서 소소시아버리스. 링가시게 동네에서 돼 현직거버리스. 링가시게 동네에서 돼 규민이 총어리스. 디디니 군제 양타고 요마리스. 다 사실 근데 결혼기 아니 대화도 동해서 해야 돼. 깨는 되는 중원에 있어 숨겨야지. 그게 되는 중소.
So, at the beginning of explaining the text, I would like to quote from Nagarjuna, the great Indian master, who, referring to the Buddha's position on the origination of suffering, said that with respect to suffering and happiness, some speak of them as self-arising, arising from themselves on their own. Others speak of them as arising from other conditions, and some even speak of sufferings as having no cause. But you, the Buddha, had explained that the sufferings arise in dependence upon its own causes and conditions. So the point... The point Nagarjuna is making is this, as sentient beings, all of us, from the smallest insects up to human being, what concerns us most is the experience of happiness and suffering. And this is in all sentient beings' kind of, existence. What concerns and what drives them is the experience of suffering and happiness. So therefore, the question of whether or not what is the nature of suffering, where does suffering come from, is an important one for us. And so if Nagarjuna says the Buddha explained the nature of suffering and their origin in terms of their causes and conditions, and therefore cultivating understanding of the nature of suffering and where they come from becomes important. And this is also in some sense implicitly recognized by all of us even as human society. Therefore we place so much emphasis on the importance of education, which is a way of helping us become better aware.
Then I think the Buddha's first Dharma wheel, we call first, according to Sanskrit, of course, in Buddhist tradition, Pali tradition, and Sanskrit tradition. The Pali tradition is the original, and Buddha taught publicly. The Sanskrit tradition is taught selected people. So sometimes historians or publicly not recorded. That happened. So in any way, the Sanskrit tradition see three Dharma wheels: first, second, third. Now here, the first Dharma wheel at Sanat, you see, he taught Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths actually, you see, out of the concept of law of causality, suffering as a result, and I say the
Origin of suffering. Origin of suffering.
The cause of suffering, to truth. Then the happiness or joyfulness, not just a mere sort of pleasure, but the all suffering eliminated or stopped due to causes of suffering eliminated from your mind. So later to truth. the permanent sort of cessation of suffering and its causes, and the way to achieve that. So that also, you see, and then 12 link from ignorance to death, 12 links. So that all Buddhist sort of traditions accept that is the 12th link of dependent arising. Now, second Dharma wheel mentioned, since the cause, since the result depend on cause. Without cause, the effect will not arise. So the effect entirely depend on cause. So now, thinking more deeper way, the very nature of cause depend on result. Without a result, it will not be a cause. And cause itself also compare its own cause, it is a result. So not only result depend on cause, but also the cause depend on result. So that is interdependency, interconnected. 다 지기 템버티기다 데부 둘 때문에 두런이 데부를 땡데버지 차이르잖아요. 편주 때. 다 그냥 균제기 다 땡중의 정신이나 아니 때문에 라왕게 두 매바디 다 타쳐다. 자자가 딘데 인도잖아요. 땡은 좀 교전도 제디 편주 때가 이거 편주 때가 이거 좀 인도잖아요. 아니 때보다 맞아봐. 뭔가 이거 인도잖아요. 다 맞아봐. 맞아봐. 때문에 라왕게 매바디 타쳐. 대단하야. 말한줄라 치 나와 있는다. 난게 나와 있는다. 낭용 강도 강이나야. 로를 샤윤데 tenjingene drupte se lo shebdo tenjingene drubina ko tebame cha de do chang gan do lo le ya temi rang ge drub se lo sha yong do adati lo le sha wa na xin xi ya ma de 가르스 samdana ko tene drub ji yin chinje la ko tebame ba rang ge drub de me ba kuni chingma do ro ya ma de sta ji shu le ribe ne yong yin de san ne 다 때문에 라왕 주변 동어도 못 줬으면 좋사마시 디삼 코인 주잖아요 아니 나랑 소리야 때문에 라왕 주변 나 윤도 다 나왔다도 준비해봤지 시해야지 봐 나왔다도 준비해봤지 시해 주잖아요 규모도 무슨 시해야 돼 혼데요 나야 믿으면 규모도 무슨 시해요 난 네게 갈 편도 가야 할까 이나 나랑 차단 걸로 깨인 주잖아요 차단 깨서 유디 댐바와지 로르샤 any 이동의 댐바 댐베 이동 명어서 로샤고도 디샤네 any 이동을 차 이동 명어로 당연로 깨고도 아대아게 체리고 가서 아른 백어서 아른 백 공기에 아주 공주 새벽 그돌이야 공주 사세 유디 차 탐전에 믿고 싶어로 샤용 거야데 야적 kub주 남도 쩨버렸어 스도가 다 공부해야지다 공부루루기 싸우시러 나래야 레던 용모 세베 타 레던 용모 남도래 대다 쩌래 선 송샤기 남도 세대야디 취미이지 남도를 저도가 세상가 취미이지 남도 깨니 차단기기 알아 취미이지 남도 깨야기 시디 그다음에 차단께서 유기문에 숙두버지기 뭐네잖아 유기문에 좀 저밤에 정신제디 나란서 나와라 저바전도 상도 전진문에 어딘데 인도산에 대다 저래 저반이 동바지 가보지 없어 다 유진원에 여배 저배 나와샤 대다도 주버 짐베 덴지기 저버체 다 저버 뒤되게 있는 남도 게임 거래 수미도 게임 거래 수미식 남도 되게 차단기 거래 차단고 관계 레서기 거래 대대전에 동행 거래 어떻게 계시셔
As explained before, if you look at the cause and effect relationship, we, from our own personal experience, can testify to the fact that effects depend upon causes. Without causes, effects simply cannot arise. So once we recognize this basic causal law, that the dependence from the results, from the effects to the cause, and one can then, using that recognition of the dependence, also infer that there is a kind of a backward relationship as well. And not only is the effect dependent upon the cause, but also cause is also dependent upon effect, because the very concept of cause, something being a cause, takes into account the notion of an effect. So in order for something to be recognized as a cause, one has to take into account this larger framework where there is a mutual dependence between cause and effect. Now, once we recognize that, then we also come to recognize that both cause and effects share this dependent reality, and even they themselves are devoid of any independent nature. One cannot speak meaningfully of one without taking into account its relationship to the other. And in this way, we can extend this understanding to everything. So in this way, one will come to recognize that something being independent and something being dependent are mutually exclusive. If something is dependent, it cannot be independent. And given that dependent nature seems to be so pervasive, one can then come to recognize that everything is devoid of independent nature, and everything is, the nature of everything is this, contingent, this dependence. And in this way, one will come to recognize that this nature is shared by everything. However, if you relate this understanding to our own ordinary naive relationship with the world does not appear to us in that manner. When we perceive something, we tend to perceive that whatever thing that is, we perceive as if this thing has some kind of existence objectively in its own right. Although the nature of the reality is dependent, but when we perceive the objects, we tend to perceive them as having some kind of discretely confined reality that is self-enclosed and complete in themselves. And once you, even though that is the perception that we have, if we relate that to a deeper understanding of their nature, then we begin to recognize there is a disparity between the way we perceive things and the way things really are. And this is one of the reasons why in the Buddhist text there is references to the reality of things being illusion-like. They tend to appear in one way, but they exist in another way. And this illusion-like nature of reality becomes, kind of more and more evident to us. Now the question is, what is the benefit of doing this kind of exercise, doing this kind of contemplation? And the benefit here is the following, because if you examine carefully the nature of emotions, strong emotions that arise in us, whether it is strong attachment or anger or hatred and so on, all of these negative emotions generally tend to assume some kind of solidity and concrete reality to which they latch on to. And underlying these emotions is also an assumption of independently existing objective things out there. And based on this, then we make mental projections. So if it is an attachment, then we project a quality of desirability onto the object, whether it is beauty or whatever it is. We, based on this assumption of something being real there, we then project the quality of desirability and we exaggerate that, attractiveness. And in fact, so the same thing applies to when we are angry towards something, we exaggerate the quality of undesirability or unattractiveness of that object which repulses us. So in fact, One modern scientist of mind is a cognitive therapist, founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, Aaron Beck. I had a conversation with him, and he once said in our conversation that when very strong emotion arises, such as attachment,
Anger.
anger. In his case, he spoke about anger. You feel so repulsive towards that object, but in that state of mind, the quality of unattractiveness, undesirability of that object is 90% of that is exaggeration. That is, projection of our mind. And this seems to be almost exactly the same point which is made in Nagarjuna's text in fundamental stanzas on the middle way, where he says that karmic actions and the afflictions that give rise to them really arise from conceptual elaborations which project things onto the object, and from this conceptual elaboration then we misperceive things which then give rise to all sorts of things. And it is through cultivating the wisdom of emptiness then this conceptual elaboration that projects, reifies things and projects intrinsic existence of things, these can be removed, and in this way the whole mechanism of karma and afflictions can be undone. So in both of these cases you can see there's a synergy between
I think I want to say karma, Sanskrit word, actually meaning is action. So any action, any sort of quite serious action always related with motivation. Some eating and go like that. That kind of action is without serious motivation. But is want to hit. That is serious motivation, anger or hatred. Then it's a serious action like that. So also it's attachment. It's a serious sort of motivation. Then you see the kasota. Now stealing also as sort of sexual misconduct. All these out of sort of, mainly out of sort of attachment, so like that. So therefore, karma, sometimes people consider karma is something, action.
So because sometimes people tend to have a wrong notion of what is meant by karma as having some kind of objective existence out there that is some kind of exercise and control over us. But karma literally means action, and it's an action involved with human intention. So to conclude, the point His Holiness was making is that the significance of taking deeply into account the understanding of emptiness is that it has direct effect upon us on dealing with our own strong emotions.
Oh yeah. So now here, ngoma journalia, sibes or tajetus, and then tawalia, mutin, Tsongkhapa changes on any Tamin Yumunga, Shir Yumuchen, the tower giving you the children, Takada, Shir Yumuchen, Nache, Shirduba. That did Yumungi Nezu, the ships how they, that Shir Yumuchen sent it, Jicta Tartasia, the Zukan and George Lane, Zane, Yuji, Yinluk, Yinlu Jorba, Yinlu, Kandachi Buge, Deshajada, Taramusha. Just Yuji, Yinlu, Deshe, Tarala, then Dene, Numu, Murigun Jordan de Tarale, Jicta Jordan de Tarale. So today in Dusane, Tamin Yumu deity, Mangche, Shirv Yumu Chenji, Shishan Yode. The Shirv Yumu Chang and Sauroko, Tadu Zimbasadi, Jicta said the Chaviare. Today in Dusane, Umanjuganaya, Yumu Jana Molu, Jigsola, Talechon, Loy, Tongjusings. Cheni, Jigsola Tower, Te, any Chadan Loti Gigaris. Tawana, Jigsola Tower, the condition never saw Lamna. Down in D, you do touch and enjoy by down in copper check, Sagi. Mikba Dalamine, number ngoni drubur zimbe zindan jenge lodi shenyu da de sunchung gores.
So, if you look at, when we talk about afflictive thoughts and emotions, the afflictions, there's a lot of explanations of these in the Buddhist texts. For example, in Vasubandhu's Abhidhammakosha, Treasure of Knowledge, he identifies 6 primary or 6 root afflictions, and among the root afflictions, one of which is more in the kind of cognitive dimension, which is a distorted knowing. And and you have on the other category more emotional types of afflictions such as attachment and so on. But underlying all of this is a distorted way of seeing things, distorted way of knowing reality. And this is often referred to as distorted knowing, or also sometimes referred to as ignorance. And this ignorance, underlying this is ignorance with relation to one's own nature of self, and is referred to as the egoistic ignorance. And so all of this has to do with our relationship with the world, and the way in which we engage with the world, the way in which we perceive the world. And when it is distorted, then this distortion gives rise to all sorts of reactions on our part, which are the emotional reactions. And so therefore, understanding the nature of reality becomes central in order to understand how to undo these processes and mechanisms. However, in the Buddhist sources, there are various degrees of subtlety when it comes to the explanation of the nature of reality. Therefore, there is also correspondingly different degrees of subtlety in identifying what that fundamental wisdom is. For example, in Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, he says that recognizing that all the afflictions and the problems the affliction give rise to comes from fundamental ignorance related to self. Therefore, the yogi will recognize that self is the object of that notion of ego and selfhood, and therefore the yogi will strive to eliminate the grasping to this self. So in this passage, Chandrakirti points out, not only is the root cause of suffering and afflictions the notion of self, but also the elimination of that, is the path leading to enlightenment.
Yeah. Stanza, 다 창조지 셈스 대양 자와직 차대기 얼바. 다디 가란즈 시기다 동네다 시 짬미시번야 디디 참월로 싸워디 다도 준비 등진해야 되다. 다도 준비 등진스러네 덴진스러네도 덴진 당 애니 타치도 랑치버 준비 진진 셴 야어도 셴디 차도세 덴데기 진진이 부티 다 녀도야 싸워디 차도 제상가 덴데 인도산에 되게 인시는 시 주로 참월로기 랑 진진 샤디 견을 때니 랑 코너 잡은 준비 로들 견을 때니 참바도 싸워야지 창문송 되게 얼마 다도 좀버디 시드디 다 매매 계속 숨고 아마데 이네 다 대박 쓰지고 되게 다 랑자와라고 직 대바매버로 직 디디 또 숭숭도 안에 편도도 봐. 자, 디레 인도선에 다 산제베 쉬어가 나네 동네기 녀도성에 싸워를 댄진다 진진이 차대야 됐어. 다 댄진 시야디 댄진사디 머리고 인도산에 머리고 인연부터 시에별로 시계별 거네 머리부터 세야마도 시에별로 저는 배야요 말이 정조선 거네 배야요 말이 장소 몽던 개미실 신은 예바 살주민신에 참한 남자 나래 보면 쳐다서 되리 자 되리 이번 인도산에 딱 머리고를 내게인데 친절로 올려야 넣어야 돼 가려 넣어서는 딥도 표준 템버고 미진셔도 제니 치르스 로 진단 개와이면 니부티 애니 지슈의 숙처르시나 지슈도만 딥도 그래스 딥도 표준 지슈 딥 지슈야 표도 중앙 공도 패나 any kuni 균 drone name ro chi gyanda iba yusane any chishu di chang ro res dinde iba yusane 대공 발레 다 교회 라라 사바 세번 교르세 송샤 되도와 스노 dinde yusane 땅고 싫어게 막 소로 봐 나디 낭배 shum은 안에 담이 더 싫어서 디기 몽바 머리고 써야 돼 시도 디체 다른 집은 진지해야 돼야 듬베지 봐 nga dewa chona sambe dumbe jigre to wa di se ya di shiro ke jmare shen yang dewa de bare ni shen chang ma re ke che re ni ne system ke shen peng sam da na rang le ke ben yo rang na ping ge sa gi dinde ge jum ze sam ta be to ne ni zo zo di rang ni ji bu dewa de be dumbe de shu chung da shen döben dumbo de shuk chertane dosen rogo to sa da dindegi shen de töndu nye dumbo de yongya la chesi ge dewa sa moyin ba dungye jude cha seba ji dewa ji da ngondo chando da dindegi da ganda ga so re dumbo cha yong indu sane tela shiro go chwa chani nyumu seru yin badi shiragu chwacha warwa. Chazanga gomulurugi changshu semdre nare ya nga la chinanga tundar jiri maa sungni di la droling na ni shugude ta mebe tawa chamuti sungni te dar dungege sawa dangzin di chiji logo lo yin bada te yin ganda dami doba shiru yoba di tong yin du zane dangzin ge wangi eni 가서 그게 딱 동네지 나대봐 뒤에 될래야 딱 동네래 제고도 사바죠 딱 동네래 타와 다게 사삼배 눈버디 리그리스 이 정도가 지금 동네가 다 좌전에 전주심 기야지 도송게 하래 저다 동네가 다 승에디 정리 타바토발래 미터매바리 남진 전두니야 그걸로 된지 용할래 동네가 다와데 미터매바리 도와
So we have been talking about the distorted understanding of our own self and its existence as the source of many of the problems and afflictions. Along with that is also another source of suffering and problem, which is extreme self-centeredness and excessive self-focus. And the fact that these two are sources of much of our problem is something that is recognized across all the major religious traditions. For example, if you look at the world's great faith traditions, the fact that many of these teachings, faith traditions, emphasize the teaching on love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, and so on, is to really help the devout practitioners to really kind of loosen their grip on this excessive self-focus and become kind of somehow overcome extreme forms of self-centeredness, which often lead individuals to be totally kind of, negligent of others' welfare, to the point sometimes even of exploiting others for one's own benefit. So the teachings on love, compassion, and so on, which is a common ethical teachings of all the major religious traditions, are aimed at helping us, deal with that excessive self-centeredness. With respect to a kind of a distorted belief in some kind of independent self, which sometimes provides the foundation for grasping at this self. Although in the non-Buddhist traditions there is no explicit teachings on no self as such, but as explained before, the faith, a single-pointed devotion to God, a single-pointed faith to God, can actually also have the effect of loosening this kind of strong belief in one's own independent self, because you see yourself as part of the creation of God. And it has, although it is not such, there is no explicit teaching on no self or emptiness in the other traditions, but there are faith-based practices which help kind of loosen this grasp. Now, of course, in the Buddhist tradition, the emphasis is really on cultivating the wisdom of no self. And this is, therefore, and when we talk about how to do that, underlying this is the recognition that, overcoming this distorted belief in self, which is the fundamental ignorance, is not something that can be achieved by simply praying or wishing, or even through cultivation of bodhicitta or compassion. As Dharmakirti says that because bodhicitta and compassion do not directly oppose the perspective of grasping at belief in independent self, therefore these practices cannot directly eliminate grasping at inherent existence and true existence of things. So the only way in which one can counter them is to cultivate the opposite perspective, which is the wisdom of no self, wisdom of emptiness. And the wisdom of emptiness represents a totally opposite perspective on understanding, perspective on reality. And when you cultivate a perspective that directly opposes our kind of normal way of belief in intrinsic objective existence, then as you cultivate that perspective, the other contrary perspective is going to be gradually undermined and eventually kind of removed. And it is in this way, Dharmakirti says that the wisdom of no self will arise in us. And for dealing with excessive self-focus and self-centeredness, then of course in the Buddhist tradition, the teachings on bodhicitta and compassion becomes important. And there, a key point is to really cultivate the altruistic aspiration to bring about others' welfare. And here Nagarjuna, for example, explains in his commentary on the Bodhicitta Vivarana, which is a text where Nagarjuna first goes into great detail explaining the various philosophical perspectives on understanding the nature of reality, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist. In this way, he presents the teaching on emptiness, and then after that, then he explains that how a person who has come to recognize the nature of reality in this way will then, when looking at other sentient beings, come to recognize that many sentient beings suffer. So, for example, from the Buddhist point of view, when you recognize that sufferings arise from their own causes and conditions, and once you also recognize that the underlying all of these conditions is this fundamental ignorance, which is a distorted way of relating to the world, then one comes to recognize that the cause of suffering, this fundamental ignorance, is something that can be removed because there is a opposite perspective, which is the wisdom that can be cultivated. And in that way, then your enthusiasm for seeking freedom from suffering becomes much more, strong. So Nagarjuna explains that someone who had gained that kind of understanding of emptiness will then, when relating to other sentient beings, will immediately give rise to a strong feeling of compassion to sentient beings who, although imprisoned in the unenlightened existence and bound with suffering, and continue to perpetuate that cycle because of their ignorance of how suffering arises, and continuing to kind of grasp onto this notion of independent self and being caught in self-centeredness. And once you recognize that there is a way out, then when you see suffering sentient beings, a genuine compassion arises in us, which then give rise to the altruistic aspiration to seek Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So it is in this way bodhicitta practice and the emptiness practice really help the practitioner, the individual, to deal with the twin sources of suffering and problem, which is grasping at independent, objectively real self on the one hand, and being caught in excessive self-focus and self-centeredness on the other.
So, sometimes I also am mentioning about my own sort of practice or experience, because you see, then audience may feel is something living. Otherwise, sometimes the people feel, oh, wonderful things on book, but not much sort of relevant here. And this is, I think, we must sort of understand that if we practice these things, it really affect our life. So the practice of bodhicitta, altruism, infinite altruism, and the practice of understanding about ultimate reality, that's my main daily practice. As soon as I wake up morning, about 3:30, as soon as I wake up, I remember these things and analyze. Where is I? I cannot find. Then meantime, you see, look, the infinite sentient being, like me, all become slave of that kind of ignorance. So therefore, naturally, so long that ultimate source of suffering remain here, keep here, and then how can we overcome suffering? So that really immense sort of help, you see, to develop some kind of sort of determination to overcome suffering, not only myself, but also entire, or say, the suffering people, suffering sentient being, like that. So very, very helpful. And more sense of concern of others, and also more sort of realization, things are not independently exist as appears, then angers, attachment automatically reduce its intensity. So result, my mind, no matter what sort of difficult circumstances, my mind comparatively quite peaceful. I hope not due to dullness. I think I can say my mind is comparatively quite sharp. In spite of that, see, I have some sort of ability to keep peace of mind. Not greatness of Dalai Lama, but through training. We are same human being. My potential, you all have same potential. Mentally, emotionally, physically, we are same. So since I can, you see, I can gain some sort of benefit through training of mind, you also, you want a happy life, isn't it? You also want less sort of problem. So then, it is up to you, within your own hand, if you pay more attention about our inner values, inner emotions. Through that way, you can develop more happier life. It's clear. As I can give you assurance, right? Through my own experience. And when I was very young, I have no interest about these things. Only interest is play, like that. Then, around 15, 16, I developed some interest about ultimate reality. I start think more seriously, but experience come much later. Then my age, late 20s and late 20s and early 30s, then I got some sort of feeling.
No. Like a taste.
Taste. Oh. It's immense help. But at that time, the infinite altruism is concerned, I really admire, you see, that kind of sort of mental state. But I feel it is quite far. Then, my age, I think, late 30s and early 40s, I received the oral transmission about the Shantadeva's book. Then think more, oh, really transform my mind. And plus some other practice. Really immense help. Although I never sort of aim these practice for my good health, but byproducts were just yesterday I had a thorough check about my physical condition, and doctors say it's a very good condition, and people, many my sort of friends, now whose age 70s and 80s, when I look their face, it seems my face a little bit younger. So it is quite clear. My mental state is quite peaceful, no matter how difficult it is. So therefore, this result of training, these trainings is possible because of human intelligence. So you all, it's the same, isn't it? And especially these young people, you have more longer period. Now, my case, I think another 10, 20, then finish. You, I think, many decades have the opportunity to practice these things, to think these things. Even you see those people who don't care about next life, all right, simply in order to be happy person on this life. These things are very helpful, clear. Now, text. 인신알이야. 45-72개. 민두가.
간시 쓰시송.
그거 어떤 뜻이야? 젊지 라마 쫑가바 그저래. 들어 그저고.
줍시바.
14th century, 14th, 15th century. You see, right from the beginning, he had keen interest about ultimate reality. He studied very rigorously, and also he received teachings from all the existing sort of different traditions at that time. He received all sort of different traditions. Then he gave up even his teaching, and he carried sort of hermit life, sort of serious sort of meditation, serious sort of analytical meditation. Then one day, you see,
So one day, the process of his inquiry culminated, reached its culmination.
Then he wrote this text, not as a sort of lekon tenjuru jikbe tia de memshe, koranda shivu jikta direct never trungnim, tulia jig, the lomo kale kembe, drumde, the one to give a sort of church, tulo josh chungse, indeed, the tujuma chimna.
So this text was composed by Tsongkhapa at the end of that long period of single-pointed meditation as a hermit, focused specifically on deepening his understanding of the ultimate nature of reality. And it was not written down as composing some kind of masterpiece treatise, but it was written down more as an expression of the profound joy and appreciation he felt to the Buddha for having taught this particular teaching, and also an expression of that joy was penned down in these lines.
동니 잡아줘는 마도 시 디콘라 산지 좀된 데가 연대 차서 마첼도 사야도 우르래. 신주간에 개인도 되는 개수로 두르잖아요. 잠도 남다도 여보로.
So, because he was so inspired and moved by that particular experience and felt the need to compose this, there are some sections, there's a little bit of exaggeration as well, where, for example, Tsongkhapa says that to this point, until he had gained this realization of emptiness, he failed to recognize even other qualities of the Buddha, But His Holiness was pointing out that he had received many other teachings before.
야, 다디인다. 토마 토안다. 대산 오럴 transmission 수디 kunur지 되거든 쉬브리.
I received
계시되거든요.
I received the oral transmission of this particular text from Kunu Lama Rinzit Dempa.
린지담바.
Kunu Lama
린지담바.
Rinzit Dempa, yeah.
다데 컨시 스위시 송원이 견도 담발라는 게 자와 던지는 거 식신도 바탈은 되스. 좀 되더라. 되산자가 좀전디에 좀 된데 대코는 이게 땡중 지신도 식베 차네 아니 캠발라는 매봤다. 랑게 식베디 치다와신도 샤나 dombar쟁에게 이뭐 인도산에 대찬에 뜸발라는 매봐 차버리스.
So the text begins with a salutation to the Buddha, and it says that it makes salutation to the Buddha on the basis that Buddha was someone who had personally gained profound realization of the truth of dependent origination. So from that point of view, Buddha exemplifies as the unexcelled knowledge. And also on the basis of that, he taught others. So when he taught others, he taught that on the basis of his own personal experience. Therefore, the Buddha is a truly excellent master, a teacher.
다원은 땡중 개심부 이모도 좀제 가르슬람나. 지된 그거 전이와 대사와 머리대 강시 통에 태도하고 땡지되고 좀 송시.
So then, the question is raised: why is it so important that the Buddha taught the dependent origination, and the Tsongkhapa is making homage to the Buddha for teaching that? What makes dependent origination so important? And the second verse writes that whatever degeneration there are in the world, the root of all these is ignorance. And you, the Buddha, taught that it is dependent origination, the seeing of which will undo this ignorance.
머리고 써야 되려야 몽성 머리고 찍. 치질로도 똑배 록시 인게 머리고 찍니. 다 안들이 코야서 하셔야 또 치질로도 머리고 드시고.
So when Tsongkhapa is identifying ignorance to be the fundamental root of all suffering and cyclic existence, he's not talking about ignorance purely as a form of not knowing, which is a kind of ignorance. But here, ignorance refers to the more fundamental kind, which is an active, distorted form of knowing.
다 되죠. 되죠. 대절로도 대바 이때지 좀 줘. 주의 되면은 지도 것도 주면. 저다는 거니까 대백권도 때는 좀 와서 좀 지신이.
So then Tsongkhapa writes that, so how can an intelligent person not comprehend that this path of dependent origination is the essential point of your teaching, referring to the Buddha? This being so, who will find, O Savior, a more wonderful way to praise you than to praise you for having taught this this origination through dependence?
Oh yeah. 다 어느 뒤에 땡중 송샤디 땡중디 컨디질 고 컨디질스라나 나고 저도마 시샤로 땡중 되버체 다 안더끔디 땡중 컨디질스 거스라바이나 땡중 참모치고 땡중 참모세 뚜뚜 땡중 참모치 다는 내 이메이지잖아요 강강 깨라라라 대절을 시키고 숨어들 야서 냉도선 지시겠어 주도 깨라라라 지메이나 그 샤나 때버바스 샤나 때버지는 게 되게 싫습니다 아니 마드베 정신도 차와바스 어디 숨겨요.
So then the question is, what exactly is the meaning of this dependent origination? And but generally, the dependent origination is a principle that is common to all the Buddhist schools, and on the common level, the meaning of dependent origination is understood in terms of dependent upon causes and conditions. So it's a causal dependence. But here, Tsongkhapa is, getting at a much subtler and deeper meaning of the word dependence. And here he writes that whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instruction can there be that is more amazing than this statement? So the point Tsongkhapa is making is that here the meaning of dependence is not purely in causal terms, but in fact dependence at the very fundamental level where everything is devoid of inherent existence.
다디 샴데 강도 수용의 집안은 통지情况 땡지 등이 켜라 저바에 자원을 줘배고 땡지 셔도 못하네 떠바시 제균이도 와게라는 생각이 무디잖아 전부책 송샤 되기 아니 랑데 중다마와 다 패시다 가서 그런다 변은 섬섬바다 즉 다가는 생각이 전도니다 엔 다가는 생각이 우마베 나는 이네 탄예도 딘주 시바다 미시버니 전에다 랑시 여버 마와도 랑시 메버 마와스니 디세니 chen 다 니체니 우마베 나네 랑시 여버 마베 우마바 네 손지기 전도 예제 디디기 땡신 잡은 중앙사대 조조 균제기 땡줄이 공부시 딘데 인도산에 규든 제비 그게 팬윤제야시도 가스 똑배 강 소소人们都 가스 로이 딱some 人们都 가스 로이 딱some 멤버 주지라 더 균제기 땡중의 사용비야래 그래서 다디 정신 매버 마베 우마베 제요는 되게 쉬워되기 땡신 잡은 조심be 이나 그 땡에 딱 봐도 좋으면 도스 나 땡에 딱 슬럽도 유지 뭐냐 주야나 대마인베 최현실의 땡에 딱 관도 딘부터 벌리도 나려야 부터 벌리도 나라 뭐 니지 좀나 디니 샥베 척베 땡에 딱베 지샤 사지 나 들어도 와 공원이 주야나 최 가다 간슬은 데레스 럽션 저도 봐. 그 데레스 루루서 말하자 인데 현실을 떼내다 따라 차도. 자 진짜 인데 아니 가서 모니지 줍지 터도 주던 gen지 자치도 와. 다 진짜 그 줍지 때 주던 gen을 라레바 주던 gen을 떼바 니지 현을 떼내 주어들 샤스. xiān mātōba rāwāng trūpa di mīndukā xiān wā tā di sōngu tūs tā di bē ngōsā chīgē sōrē.
So in stanza 6 and 7 we read that by grasping at it the childish strengthen bondage to extreme views. For the wise this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. And since this teaching is not seen elsewhere, you alone are the teacher. And like calling folks Alliant for the Tritika, it would be a word of flattery. The point Tsongkhapa is making here is this, that this subtle meaning of dependent origination is... So here the middle way school is explaining that this, according to this subtle meaning of dependent origination, then the concept of dependence is not confined just to dependence in terms of causes and conditions. And it's a subtler kind. For example, within the Buddhist schools, there are other schools such as the Vaibhashika, Sutrantika, Mind Only, and even within the Madhyamaka, the middle way school, there are two subdivisions. Other than the Prasangika, which rejects any notion of objective intrinsicness, all the other Buddhist schools, even those Buddhist schools, although they embrace the teaching of dependent origination, they also understand dependent origination only at the level of causes and conditions. So they still embrace, subscribe to some notion of objectivity to things, because their argument is that if things do not possess objective essence, then how can a particular cause be related to another effect, and how can a particular cause can give rise to a particular type of effect? So what the text is saying is that these people use causal relations as a basis for postulating objective existence, but the Madhyamaka school, the middle way school, uses the same argument to the opposite purpose, which is to say that because things arise from causes and conditions, it implies that even these individual objects which relate as constant conditions themselves are devoid of dependent origination. Because, when we speak about their reality and nature, we can understand it only in terms of not only causally dependent origination, but also even their identities as things as such are constructed in a dependent relation and dependent context. So the dependent origination is not simply a meaning of causally arising, but also dependent origination refers to their nature as dependent constructs and dependent designation. And in this way, for example, in Buddha Palita, and there is an important line where Buddha Palita says that if things and events possess objective reality, then when we search for their essence, we should be able to just point our finger and say, this is the thing. But when we examine in such a manner, what we find is just an utterly dependent, contingent nature, and the identities of things arise only within that kind of dependent context. But if things do possess objective essence, then we should be able to point out when we are looking for that reality. That's not the case. So in this way, the text is saying that this subtle meaning of dependent origination that the Buddha has taught is truly a wonderful teaching.
가사 당연히 치게 되고 다 개리 다 총은디 개디 뭐는 개디 뭐는 정신래 여버 제소 따잖아 대단한 뭐고 균제 매버 저 따오스 다 뭐고 라면을 주고 지켜라 세계 여버 이나 아니 뭐고 규제를 떠보면 인 되고다스.
So similarly, Nagarjuna in his Nagarjuna also makes the point in his rebuttal of objections, Vigraha Vartani. He says that the realists who insist on accepting some kind of objective essence to things and events are ultimately undermining their own position of accepting causes and conditions. Because if things possess essences which are unchangeable, then that concept is totally incompatible with the idea of causation. So therefore, Nagarjuna is pointing out that those who subscribe to a notion of essence and intrinsic existence are in fact undermining the whole basis of causal relations.
Under the physics 나는 쉐베이나 칭모블 집에이나 치 수정 모블 집에이나 and the quantum physics that taushali.
So, with respect to the nature of physical world, if you look at the very subtle explanations of the quantum physics, there are resonances that are similar to the Nagarjunan idea of emptiness.
And the same time, might only say that the 유진이 니고리 사실이야. 유진이 니고 에메드체. any 수정이 출자인도 전에 니기마빈도 전에 다 수정이 출전주고 말했어요 소샤티.
So similarly, the mind-only school's position, which rejects reality of external physical world, is also driven by the same kind of quest. Because when you look for objective essences in the material world, since you are unable to find it, the mind-only schools opt the position that ultimately they are all mental projections and extensions of our perception. So therefore, what is real is only mind.
자, 민점 다점게 최샤투나 모니기 좀 해봐. 저 때에 딱 받고는 여기 샤투나 치르모주 치르메 시바여서 샤고.
So on the other hand, if one is able to really understand the existence and nature of reality within the this subtle understanding of dependent origination, where the reality and existence of things are understood purely as arising within the framework of dependent constructs and dependent relations, then you don't have to make this kind of categorical distinctions between, matter is unreal and mind is real. Just as you can accept the dependent nature of physical world, one can also accept the dependent nature of the mental world as well.
고물루주기 싸우시로 단 고물루주기 가다 시진기 동닉 따와 따는 법이 숨기 개부대 싸우시로지 싸우시로기 rabshin ishu tsashibati kaya shishi shadiwari. Oda di naliya di sungduwa tenjin rabar zhungwa kang tenjin tongpa nidu shay. Tenjin dagwa di tinjin ume lami yinos. Kanchi tenjin mayinba chonga yiba mayinba, tiji tongpa mayinba chonga yiba mayinba susung shayda di. Domda di shay.
So in Nagarjuna's text, Fundamental Stanzas on a Middle Way, which by the way is the most important text by Nagarjuna on the teaching on emptiness, and within that text, the 24th chapter is the most important chapter of that particular text by Nagarjuna. And there he explains in the following. He says, whatever is dependently originated, that has been described to be empty. And this is the middle way. And this is also the dependently designated. And then he goes on to say that there is nothing that is not dependently arisen, and there is nothing that is not emptiness. So here Nagarjuna explains how the subtle meaning of dependent origination really is equivalent to the meaning of emptiness.
gyāwātāni mōchō tōngāni kīru chidhā kōntu chīpa nū sāyatiki tōngni dhūbyāki dhūbchī thārdū tēnchī dhāpāni chōngās tēne tākwā sāyāndi tā tēne tāksam rēsila nā ngōbu rāngshīngi tānyadū rāngshīngi yabar māwē umabā nē sōngā chīka samalōki tēne tāksam mārī tuanjī ngōnyā chūgū rē sāyāni tā tānyadū rāngzhēn shēngē chīki tā tānyadū rāngzhēn kāsō tā māshāna 최대 견내다 때밀 신세. 사실은 이두산에 때에 땅섬 세야디 아니 말이라 균제 땡중 세야디기 모니기 최모 진행기 전쟁의 예바지 수 주용구야래. 근데 이번 이두산에 모니기 주베 주지를 것이야 디거니 모니 모두 벌써 때 개다 차는 거였어. 그봐. 다지네 무직과 tenjung kyan malange ta di jidin kopa po mindunga di chik daga na shingi kasa jidin kopa po mindunga inba gyunze ke shebe ina ya didu cheba po di da rangwa shego warba dinde indu long cheja di gyunze zam shebe ina ya long cheba po da kasa wala pake chisamne pake 다가다 다도 주드베지 시기에 있잖아요. 그 땡중 고아들에 두고 말해. 근데 인도 천들의 주도 집에 좀더 찍려야 아니 땡이 중으로 봐서나 다모도 쓰고다. 모두에 된시
And then the text reads that wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge, wondrous speaker, wondrous savior, I pay homage.
대대비 땡중 기 아니 데미 드윈드자네 게다다 아니 땡중 코라 캠블링에기 게다 모주베 다 땡지도 되게 되게 최유로 지도권도 치고 뉴스
So it writes that I pay homage to that teacher who taught well dependent origination. And then the text reads, to help heal sentient beings, O benefactor, you the Buddha have taught the peerless reason to ascertain emptiness, the heart of the teaching. So this is referring to dependent origination to be the highest form of reasoning to establish the meaning of emptiness. And then it goes on to say that for you, when one sees, this way of dependent origination, those who perceive it as contradictory or as unestablished, how can they comprehend your system? And this is a reference to the realists who, and which includes also the other Buddhist schools as well. Many of the Buddhist schools would accept the teaching on dependent origination, but they will only accept it in terms of dependent causal origination. So for them, the fact that things have arise from causes and conditions, their own unique causes, indicates that they have some kind of objective, objective intrinsic existence. So therefore, for them, if you say things are empty, devoid of intrinsic existence because they are dependently originated, then they will say it's a contradictory. If it's dependently originated, it should possess intrinsic existence. For the non-Buddhists, who majority of who are theists, then their understanding of the ultimate origination of universe is attributed to a theistic understanding, so they won't accept the proposition that things and events are purely dependently arisen. So for them, they will say this is a reason unestablished. So the text is saying that those who respond to this in this kind of manner, they cannot understand the full meaning of the Buddha's teaching.
Oh yeah, that's it. Children, them she don't want you. Then you turn to Tong, Rangxin Jin don't want the Chaji Taiwan engagings. Tell a double Tong, Donald Chow, Merush, Chadasella, don't have Yang to Tong. Did you check it down the Tension Tong, Lebanon? Ten good to remember the Rashid in the Yevemi. Demin Namga Medoshi, Tenama, then Yemai. Mo to not tell you what you can do, girl.
So then text goes on to read that whereas, now he's explaining the contrary perspective, whereas when one sees the opposite, since there can be no function in emptiness, nor emptiness in what has functions, one falls into a dreadful abyss, you maintain. Therefore, in your teaching, seeing dependent origination is hailed, and that too not as an utter non-existence, nor as intrinsic existence. The non-contingent is like the sky flower. Hence, there is nothing that is not dependent. If things exist through their essence, their dependence on causes and conditions for their existence is a contradiction. And therefore, since no phenomena exist other than origination through dependence, no phenomena exist other than being devoid of intrinsic existence, you taught.
Oh yeah, that is what the Russian Taiwan members. 말해. 들러서 가.
No.
어디서? 디지털은 좀 원래 맞아 준 거예요. 리진 동 맞아 준 거 봤어. 러시아 도관 왜 주는 거는 양에다 주근 도관 왜 봤어. 디지털은 남자시 생겨자야도 캐버솔로서 뭐 들러서 이거 니. 러시아 가야 왜 봤던 들러 때는 진주면 남샤터죠. 제가 이 민견도 몇지그 스타디 조지들도가. 러시아 매 봤던 편주 때는 주버 디 직조수 직송 삼도 마세스 디 때는 주면 주진기 타다와라 미진시사 탄이 직접서 시왔다 또 때는 주면 주진기 타다와라 미진시스 너다 되게 타다와라 미진시 레슨 되는 건지 마을라는 매베 되게 하는 거 자시로 난게 되는 때는 다고 되니 우면람이 노사게 우면 따왔다는 법도산에 변하지 무시경고 된지서 하고 뭐 가다 줄을 도와주세요 된지 뭐로 직도 되게 된지 저걸로 예매경고 된지 사들 되지 동서 조주도 다 윤정호 탐절을이야 때는 따고 봐 사들 두빈도산에 동서 직분해 봐 때는 예정이지 다시 사들이 저들이 때는 좀 주진기 타다와라 미진시 렉슨 되는 거 주지 마을라나 매배교스 지금 뭐요 또 거는 들려지는 중 여기 기본으로 들려면서 찍었다 들려면도 좋아 강
So then the text goes on to from verse 16. So from verse 16 to 20, end of 21, the main point the text is explaining is that not only the two things, causal dependence on the one side and things being devoid of inherent existence, not only are these two things mutually compatible, but in fact, the fact that things arise from their causes and conditions and have that dependent nature is the very premise, very ground that demonstrate their lack of intrinsic existence. So the text says that there is no existence, intrinsic existence at all, and that all functions as this arising and dependent on that what is need is there to say that the two converge without conflict? It is through the reason of dependent origination that one does not lean towards an extreme that you have declared that extreme excellently is the reason, O Savior, of your being an excelled speaker. And the point the text is making is this, if you use dependent origination as the primary kind of, the argument or the ground to establish your understanding emptiness and prove the absence of inherent existence of everything, this is a much more powerful approach because there are other forms of reasoning found in other texts, but the kind of the significance and advantage of using dependent origination is that it has the advantage of making sure that you don't fall into either of the extremes of eternalism or absolutism on the one hand, and extremes of annihilation or nihilism on the other, because the very phrase dependent origination, dependent precludes independent existence, but also the word dependent also suggests that it's not nothing. Things do exist, and therefore it has the advantage of guarding one against falling into either of the two extremes. So this is the point being made in the text.
몽배 전도 송어에 거기저도 현재와 대리심에 미수줄을 사지. 최기 숨그 제베서 때는 좀 그냥 돈이 얼음 미수 되는 거 와서죠. 정신 매를 집에고 라면 되주는 이거 미니진도 정신도 지나 타고 겨운데 파전을 줄 내주면 용어는 되고 주의기 바라서 특관기네 되어 자. 좀전 가라서나 정신 주민 정신스럽나 좀 뭐이 봐. 거래 정신을 이거 거래 시수도 되고 이나 just matter of 진짜 대단 댄데 스럽도 편주 되네 주되네 시다 규진지 쉐버 신주자네 대니부디 지도 보는 시절에 매견도 원이도 줄 지지 때는 중앙가 러시아는 때문에 넘버라면 되나면 되게 규모신도 송 신화다 디지르샤.
So then from verse 22, which reads, being enslaved by ignorance, those who fiercely oppose you, referring to the Buddha, what is so astonishing about their being unable to bear the sound of no intrinsic existence? And then in the next stanza onwards, the text explains that the Buddhists, on the other hand, who while accepting the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination, but opposes to the teaching on emptiness of inherent existence, are actually something that is surprising because they should know, the implications of the teaching. And for example, in verse 26, it says that intrinsic nature, uncreated and non-contingent, dependent origination, contingent and created, how can these two converge upon a single basis without contradiction? So if you accept things to possess intrinsic nature, then you also are implicitly accepting things to possess some kind of independence at some level, and that notion is contradictory with taking things to be dependent, created, and causally arisen. So then the text reads, therefore, whatever originates dependently, though primordially free of intrinsic existence, appears as if it does possess intrinsic existence. So you taught all this to be illusion-like.
Oh yeah, that is what the church is a temple of Kavan Gaya children to Lamania song and the in the Lecorpom. Chilijan, they should Tonda Madongo, Tonda was a good go to the Zesher. Chigi Mawan Dama, Tony, Lamdi, Susan, Saman children, never yet.
So then the text goes on to read that through this very fact, I understand well the statement that by what you have taught, those opponents who challenge you cannot find faults that accord with reason. And then it goes on to say that through this very path of dependent origination, the rationale for your speech being peerless, convictions arises in me that your other words are valid as well.
Oh yeah, that is what the tension in the lesson of church is all over. Conversion, you go out torture. Church then should be urine out and she can doubt our attention. Emma Kevin, Cheva for the shoe, to the kind of church communion. Choosing too much, which is an talent chocolate, the water.
And then it goes on to explain that you who speak excellently by seeing as it is, for those who train in your footsteps, all degenerations will become removed, for the root of all faults will be undone. And then it continues until the author writes, alas, this is on verse 35, my mind was defeated by ignorance. Though I have sought refuge for a long time in such an embodiment of excellence, I possess not a fraction of his qualities.
Oh, yeah. 基于道路毛病中，真正有的碰过了，人类教授上去也原来车上马塞多少，这个学的人。
So this last line is the one that I was referring to earlier, being a little bit of exaggeration, because the author is writing that until he gained this realization, he possessed not a fraction of the Buddha's qualities.
에디 저르시 개인 주베 그도다 데 까마버르베도 주군이 개인 주 주부시 개인 주 말에 저상 아니 되네야 전에 개수는 셰베 그도리야 잠로 남다면은 이제 넘버 남다면서 쇼시다
So this is of course not true, literally speaking, because before this, Tsongkhapa, the author, has already received many other teachings. So even from the beginning, when he received the layperson's vows from Karmapa Rebbedoji, he had taken refuge, and obtaining refuge is a quality that is a fraction of the Buddha's qualities.
왠지 치다 카르셔가 쏘고 주는 거는 결을 주고서 20원 니한 개와 산양기 덤배다나 던데다고도 싫어나 던데시고 이러나 겨 부줄래고 저기 생기면
So then Tsongkhapa goes on in the same vein when he writes in verse 36, nonetheless, before the stream of this life flowing towards death has come to cease, and that I have found slight faith in you, even this I think to be fortunate. Among teachers, the teacher of dependent origination, amongst wisdom, the knowledge of dependent origination. You, who are most excellent like the kings in the world, know this perfectly well, not others.
최지신이 가서 뭐 땡땡이를 잡는 대한양에 다시 시주면서 결론에 깨모 최기 때문에 강간나는 거 다들 시주시 최전지 뭐 수미고 다들 패고 타다 줘봐다면서 다 주지 그렇다는 거지 걸고 결혼다고 캐는 세세들 세신도 레고달라 가이가 라원샤이 크리스민 전에 짜바체는 줘야지 짜바체가 계속 이미 인도산에 딕나 반대처라디 이게 세매숑 미세전 다디 아주 별이야. 괜히 시워서 거란기 가도 우모바이리 참아바이리 되는 인도산에 우세 생기지 뉴스에 시기도 와. 왜 개치 모르셔디.
Then he writes that
제가 어제 인도 배고 찾아 줘봐다. 따오 견주 동바다. 기구 균이 때셔 봐서야지. 균제기 땡중 시에 관에 모두 토야. 땡중의 대권 때는 땡중의 된 시에 관에 당연히 딜름도 균제기 땡중 시에 관에 랜저로 뭔가 머리고 세니 먼저 줘야. 때는 땡중 시에네 아니 모니 대권은 좀 뭔가 머리고 년부체니 머리고 세니 내려 줘야. 근데 인도 기구tun이 때셔 롱도 코 줘야.
So the author writes that all that you have taught proceeds by way of dependent origination. That too is done for the sake of nirvana. You have no deeds that do not bring peace. And then he writes, alas, your teaching is such, in whosoever ears it falls, they all attain peace. So who would not be honored to uphold your teaching? It overcomes all opposing challenges. It's free from contradiction between earlier and latter parts. It grants fulfillment of being's two aims. For this system, my joy increases evermore. This in the first line of and the second line of stanza 40 then explains the importance of critical reflection in the context of Buddhist practice. The reference that the teaching on emptiness and dependent origination helps oppose all challenges and also make one free from contradictory viewpoints within oneself, really emphasizes the need to engage in critical thinking on the part of the Buddhist practitioner. And that's why in the history of Buddhist thought, we see a tremendous emphasis placed on the study of logic and epistemological thinking. For example, the writings of Dignaga and Dharmakirti became so influential and important. And in the case of Tibet, Shantarakshita, who was instrumental in establishing Buddha Dharma in Tibet, he was not only a Madhyamaka, middle way school master, but also he was an epistemologist, a logician as well. And in fact, there was a saying emerged which says that epistemology, logic, and middle way philosophy, emptiness, are these two are like two lions, kind of pulling something or holding something side by side. So it explains, and then the reference to it grants fulfillment of being's two aims refer to the temporary aim of gaining a fortunate rebirth and the ultimate aim of gaining liberation, freedom from suffering. And both of these are related to the teaching on dependent origination, because by understanding the teaching on dependent origination at the kind of basic level, which is the level of causes, conditions, one understands the law of causality, and by understanding the law of karma, one respects the law of karma, and based upon that engages in moral discipline, which then give rise to the attainment of a fortunate rebirth. So that's the temporary aim. And by understanding dependent origination at the subtle level of meaning of emptiness, one is able to eliminate the subtle fundamental ignorance, which is the ignorance pertaining to the nature of reality, which then leads to the attainment of liberation. So attainment of both temporary aims of ensuring higher rebirth as well as attainment of liberation, both of these become functions of deepening our understanding of the meaning of dependent origination.
Oh yeah. 디 치도 교진은 라라고도 현도서 두고는 론조서 당면 개발 양야다. 관계 연전 통원이 적중냐를 지시는 이 두단 최전의 결례마도 개와시. 대인양의 수기는 두배 볼라 마이 제수성 지시도 다게 동미시. 딜랑 추송 상반은 천배배제로도 외지 자외 연구 덤바태의 상향이 딘데도 손님도 일을 투배 손님이 샤와성야 차와의 동남다 쓰신도 매스. 너 자전매도 중앙에 루산대야 미케베 교회 배반 자신도 남바꾸도 증거체 춘주선의 당에는 배바토메 캐바의 제도는 효기는 공부양의 양도 세 제지랑시 대바의 수만다는 장원 지지도 자와의 다게 있는 군도 동
So, and then the text goes on to read from verse 41. For its sake you have given away again and again over countless eons, sometimes your body, at others your life, as well as your loving kin and resources of wealth, and so on. And then we read up to stanza stanza 49. So the 48 reads, at such times as I studied the numerous works of both Buddhist and non-Buddhist schools, my mind became tormented evermore, constantly by the network of doubts. Seeing this situation, I strove with a multitude of efforts to follow after the learned ones and sought your intention again and again.
So here I would like to mention, I think the Panchaparamita Sutra, Buddha's second Dhamma wheel, and also the third Dhamma wheel is mentioned about the ultimate reality. So the Nagarjuna mainly written down about ultimate reality. Arya Asanga mainly is how to reach step by step to Buddhahood. So that mainly Arya Asanga. So these two scholars of Nalanda very important. Now Nagarjuna, his own disciple Aryadeva, then Vabhaviga, Buddhapalita. Among his two sort of students, Vabhaviga and Buddhapalita, different views. So writing, firstly, Buddha Palita. Then Viveka wrote another sort of commentary about Madhyamika Kasab, Madhyamika Mulakarika. He raised some questions about Buddha Palita's sort of view. Then Chandakirti comes. Chandakirti again now raised, you see, a lot of questions and argument with the view which expressed by Viveka. So these, I think, three commentary of the main text wrote by Nagarjuna, really extremely interesting. See, those people who really serious about this sort of matter, then should read these, at least the three books, no, three commentaries. Then you get the deeper understanding about the real sort of point of ultimate reality. Immense help. Thoba manana, immerism tendero. Thoba ya koini. De kaksha na indisen any service which I
One advantage of having such diverse interpretation is that they raises a lot of questions and which then make us critically think.
Oh. Now, that Kyuji Lami take place together with Tabat, Shishinda Lunda, Urusunu Kundes, Timmy making work yet. Solo color Tommy to Tazim in the was Lama, was better than the sensible, Lamited was Dagi Yasuto. Zabakura Sungan, Zabashan, and the Ninja Kaba, Dilson, Chetan. That is.
So from verse 49, the author explains this. The night lily grove of Nagarjuna's treatises, Nagarjuna whom you prophesied, referring to the Buddha, would unravel your unexcelled vehicle as it is, shunning extremes of existence and non-existence, and illuminated by the garland of white lights of Chandras, referring to Chandrakirti, Chandra's well-uttered insights, Chandra whose standless wisdom orb is full, who glides fearlessly across scripture's space, who dispels the darkness of extremist hearts and outshines the constellation of false speakers. When through my teacher's kindness I saw this, my mind found a rest at last.
Zabakule Sungan, Zabashan, and Dinji Kaba Dilson, Dennis, Natural, so became Longi Tazo, the Balana with the John and Lamatim, Gaudian, with Jurong. Panzate, Tamar Sideva, Nandolung, and Namamis, Tamangazin, Tomalishi, without a Dennis, Tuban, Kizan, Tabasha the Common, and the new was in the Trubadi. Tawanshi, Pelagin, number of Japanese and dollars, thousand of citizens, son of which they joined. Langdon, I was so young without the torch shows. That's truth.
So then the author goes on to write that of all your deeds, referring to the Buddha, all your deeds, your speech is supreme. Within that too, it is this very speech, referring to the speech on dependent origination. So the wise should remember the Buddha through this teaching of dependent origination. Following such a teacher and having become a renunciate, having studied the conqueror's words not too poorly, referring to the author himself, this monk who strives in the yogic practices, such is the depth of his reverence to the great seer. Since it is due to my teacher's kindness I have met with the teaching of the unexcelled teacher, I dedicate this virtue too towards the cause for all beings to be sustained by sublime mentors. May the teaching of this beneficent one till world's end be unshaken by the winds of evil thoughts. May it always be filled with those who find conviction in the teachings, in the teacher, by understanding the teaching's true nature. May I never falter even for an instant to uphold the excellent way of the sage, which illuminates the principle of dependent origination, and through all my births, even giving away my body and life. May I spend day and night carefully reflecting by what means can I enhance this teaching achieved by the Supreme Savior through strenuous efforts over countless eons. As I strive in this with pure intention, may the Brahma, Indra, and the world's guardians and protectors such as Mahakala unswervingly always assist me. That's the end.
Oh, yeah. So this text, quite short, but meantime, if we think, let's say, Kasoda, if we think or analyze, then this is very important text, very helpful. So I think 1950, I think 53, I learned this by heart, memorized.
Memorized it.
Memorized. Then, whenever I have some sort of, let's say, the leisure time, I recite this and think. And also sometimes during night, if you see there's some because of midnight awake and the sleep not easily come, then recite this, think. Then I think the emptiness is very helpful to bring sleep. So this is very good, very good. Then another verse, 8 verses about bodhicitta, about altruism, and how to deal with our problems. Very short. So I often see telling people that text also is worthwhile to memorize. So these 2 texts, memorize, and then occasionally think, recite, think. I think much stronger than recite Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Many sometimes I jokingly telling people when we little bit hurry and Om Mani Padme Hum, that sometimes we recite Om Mani, Om Mani, Om Mani, Om Mani. So Mani, actually Sanskrit word Mani means jewel, but the sound looks like money like that. So I think all American actually recite money that. So the real transformation, our emotion is not recite mantra, not by just recitation of a mantra, but thinking these things and carry some kind of constant combat our wrong views and these right views. That's the way to transform our emotion. So I usually describe the Buddhist way of sort of practice is utilize human intelligence, maximum way, critical way, and then through that way transform our emotion. So therefore, knowledge is very important. Study, read these texts is very, very essential. Like that. So, then they simply do me do. Simply do it. Donam says some survey. Donam says some survey. Now last about altruism. Now no time is to explain, but altruism is really one of the ultimate source of inner peace. When we develop anger, hatred, jealousy, you see, there is sort of the tendency we have sort of strong, view or feeling, I and they. So then you see the anger, hatred, fear also. Sense of concern of others' well-being. Gradually that becomes stronger. Then the very basis of these sort of emotion then reduce. Logically, when you have genuine sense of concern of others' well-being, then how can you bully them? How can you cheat them, exploit them? So when your sort of mental attitude really is cherishing their well-being, then, and also you see that based on concept of oneness of all sentient being, and particularly oneness of all human being, then, you see, the distrust, suspicion, these automatically reduce. You really develop dear feeling to other. So no room cheating, exploiting these things. As a result, you never get feeling of loneliness. You always feel very close with other. If you too much self-centered attitude, then you distance from other. Result, you yourself then become lonely feeling, then distrust, fear, these things come. So even just day-to-day peace of mind, these practice is extremely important, very helpful. So now one Kasota recite that verses 3 times.
So the text for the Bodhicitta is on verse 14, at page 14, and there's a little reordering of the first stanza to be done. So if you can all read with me 3 times together, it's on page 14.
Now here, you see, visualize, those Buddhists visualize Buddha and Nagarjuna. And then those Christians visualize Jesus Christ. And those Islam follower, if there is some, if there are, you see, think Allah and Muhammad. Like that, all major religious traditions, as I mentioned before, you see, teaching or talking the importance of love, compassion. So now here, you can cultivate infinite altruism in the front of your own God, like that. And then those non-believer, then simply think, when we born, our mother provide us immense affection. How much you value this affection? So therefore, remember that. Now I survived, I grown up, ultimately because of my mother's affection. So that consider something very, very precious. And then more altruistic sort of mental attitude, your physical also, you see, becoming much more healthier. Too much self-centered, then creates fear. Fear brings anger, very bad for our health. So therefore, remember these things, then some kind of slogan or pledge. Now, repeat 3 times.
So I think we will read it as it is on the text here. It's on page 14. So let's all read together 3 times. Until I reach full enlightenment, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha with a wish to free all beings. Enthused by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind for full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Until I reach full enlightenment, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha with a wish to free all beings. Enthused by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind for full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Until I reach full enlightenment, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha with a wish to free all beings. Enthused by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind for full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. as long as space remains and as long as sentient beings remain. Until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.
Thank you. Now completed. Now time for lunch.
Thank you, Your Holiness. His Holiness does not receive any funds at all for the public lectures that he gives. None of the funds go to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. So this is a breakdown of the fees. And before that, I want to apologize on behalf of Deer Park. There was a website that we didn't realize was up, and a number of tickets were sold. A number of people had to sit on the ground, and I apologize for that. They were in samsara, and for that we are truly sorry and apologize. It was an electronic hell for us too, believe me. The total revenues roughly were $187,000. The total costs were $111,000. And what is left is roughly $76,000. That money will go to Deer Park, a Buddhist center and monastery for education and religious studies. And that's a gift from His Holiness to the Deer Park Center. And thank you very much.